Here's a quick overview about MPUs or main panel upgrades, as well as the other options that we can offer on an installation where it's required. First, what's an MPU? Main panel upgrade is a service in which the existing service panel is upgraded to a new one with new circuit breakers. Why it's necessary is generally when the existing panel is not able to handle the additional loads that the solar system is going to be bringing in, or if the existing panel is outdated or out of code. Certain older panels can pose an electrical hazard, and so they do need to be replaced. What is a relocation? That's when a main panel needs to be upgraded and it can't stay where it currently is based on utility or AHJ requirements. All relocations are a main panel upgrade. Not all main panel upgrades require a relocation. That's the difference. A utility and the AHJ both must sign off on a new location of the meter to meet both of their codes. They can be a little trickier and take a little longer. So here's what you want to look for first to try and determine upfront whether you're going to need a relocation or an upgrade. Take a look at where the main panel sits. Is it inside the home? Is it within 3 feet of a gas line? Is it under an awning or between windows? Is it one of the prohibited brand names? Are there bus bars or amp size that aren't going to meet the needs? What is the maximum tolerance for amperage that it's going to be able to handle? Are we going to need a new MPU to handle the additional electricity coming through the PV system? And lastly, is it easily accessible? Is it clear of foliage and debris? As you can see from this example here, there's no way we can get to this easily, so this would require both an upgrade and a relocation. Here's a quick reference point for how to tell whether it's within the 3-foot clearance of the gas meter. On the left, that it's less than 3 feet away, you have to measure horizontally. You can't measure diagonally. It's unlikely that the one on the right will need a relocation because it's over 3 feet. As you can see, it's about 4 feet there. Here's some more relocation examples. On the left, that's right up against the window. We cannot put anything in there. That's going to be a code violation. We will need to move that entire main panel, even though it doesn't look too old. On the right, this one's tucked way into the corner. We will need to relocate this one as well. And it looks like it might be a little bit older model anyway. And lastly, here's a great example of one of the creative ways that somebody remodeled their house around an existing meter. So this definitely cannot fly. Here's how to understand the bus bar. First, you want to locate the main breaker. It's always going to be a double paired switch, as you can see, and it's generally going to be either 100, 125, or 200 amps, and you'll see that on the sticker. You can find that tolerance there. Lastly, you can make an educated guess. Does it look really old? Is it one of these older models, or is it something that they did just as a DIY project on the side? Here's the math. You can review this slide at your leisure. Here's the math for Solar Edge. Again, you can review this later. Now we get into the prohibited brands. Bulldog or Pushmatic, Zinsco or Sylvania, FPE or Stablock. Again, you can tell that these are all pretty old just from how different they look from a normal circuit box. We've also got Challenger on here. This one might trick you into thinking it's allowed, but as you can see there on the zoom in, there's a bare exposed metal bar that presents an arc risk. So this is always going to be a situation where you want to know what you're looking at, what you're looking for to help determine. So if a home seems like it's a little bit older part of the town and you're talking to the homeowner and they have not done any remodeling, or maybe they have, but they're somewhat of a hobbyist, definitely good to do a little bit of due diligence up front. Next, you're going to learn how to identify how the home's electricity is served or the service. In this case, you can obviously tell it's overhead. The service mast is going to come up through the roof, and you'll see the wires going over the overhead above you. This one does need an MPU in this case, because as you can see, the meter is a standalone meter globe, and we're going to combine that into a meter main combo. Also want to be aware of pool requirements. A lot of AHJs will vary on their tolerance, but you just want to do a little bit of, again, professional judgment and measurements to make sure that it's far enough away and not directly dangling over the pool. These are all examples of situations where the home is fed underneath. The electricity service comes in underneath. So there's no overhead wires, and it comes up into the meter combo there. 2 of these will need a relocation, and we've already covered why on the previous slides. So if you review which ones, you can come back to this slide and see if your guess is correct. If you said the middle one and the one on the right, you're correct. The middle one is too close to this permanent corner here. And this one on the right is too close to this gas meter. That's only about a couple feet, not 3. There's also the option in certain utilities for what's called a GMA or an RMA. They are meter adapters. Basically, this is going to be an alternate method that allows us to tie in the solar system on a more complex installation instead of upgrading the full panel. Note that this is not something you can sell. This is just going to be a secondary option that we will use as a last resort to avoid the large cost of an MPU if needed. There are going to be some cases where we cannot do this. Again, if they are a prohibited brand of panel, we will automatically DQ it unless they go to a full MPU. Each of the utilities will have their own requirements about this. Some will help us complete the install. Some will be on site, and some just have us do everything, and they'll come and check our work. Here's another option. We can do what's called a pass-through main. This lets us install an alternate sub-panel instead of a full MPU. It's a lot faster, and it's not that much higher cost than just an MPU alone. It's definitely much cheaper than an MPU and relocation if that's what's going to be required, and it will speed up the timeline. We also have a new technology called Power Control System, or PCS. This is using Enphase's software and the Enphase IQ batteries. So we are allowed to tie in batteries that will basically be throttled to control how much of the solar is used and fed into the meter. That does mean that there will be some production losses. Basically, we are forcing the solar to clip the power before it enters the home. But this will be, again, less expensive than adding on a full main panel upgrade to the entire system. Use the math chart to determine if an MPU is going to be required anyway, regardless, because of the size of the system. There are going to be 2 different ways to sell MPUs. You have what's called if needed versus include regardless. It does make a difference. If needed is going to be if you're not quite sure, there could be some potential concerns, but you want us to have the cost in there as a backup in case you need it. Always want to set proper expectations with the homeowner. We may not actually replace their main panel. It'll be returned to you with your commission, with the understanding that refunding the customer would create the best experience. If the system is oversized, we may just propose a smaller system by 1 panel or so, 1 or 2, to avoid the MPU or an alternate method of tie-in. If it must be replaced or upgraded, we will communicate with you at that time. If you want to do include regardless, that means the homeowner wants the new panel and fully understands that they are entering in a longer project time frame. It will always add time and a little bit higher costs just because of that, especially if there's any exposed stucco that needs to be repaired. This will also not be a magical cure-all for any electrical issues inside the home. If they're saying they're getting popping breakers inside the home, solar is not going to be the fairy godmother that comes in and magically fixes that. Here's some things to understand about a surface mount versus a flush mount. So a surface mount is when the panel is outside of the wall itself. It's not embedded directly into it. So it doesn't mean that we have to dig into the wall to remove and replace it. It's generally going to be a little bit faster and easier. A flush stucco repair will take a little bit longer. It will be intentionally left exposed as well for what's called the rough-in inspection. And that just means the utility needs to come and check the electrical before we have patched it all back up. So please understand that there will be some what looks like unfinished work left for a certain amount of time while that inspection takes place. Here's an example of that secondary flush stucco repair. So as you can see, we had to dig into the wall, cut out the old stucco, put in the new panel. We put in a moisture-proof backing and then a wire mesh. After the inspection, we're going to put over the new stucco and some paint. It will always look different. Applying fresh paint to an older home will take time for the weathering to appear. Lastly, we're going to paint in that new conduit, again, as close as match as possible. We're always going to do our best to leave it better than we found it, but please set the expectation with the homeowner that this is a construction project on their home. So it's going to take time. It's going to look potentially a little bit different than they're used to, maybe even a little messy. If it's absolutely outside the bounds of what they're happy with, please have them contact us and we'll do our best to make it right. Here's an overview of the timeline. You can review this on your own time in more detail. But in general, MPUs can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. It will always depend on the utility company, how busy they are, and the AHJ's requirements. Here's some highlights you can share with the homeowner. We're going to be coming out to the site at certain points. Again, you can review this in more detail with the homeowner. Bottom line, we always want to create exceptional energy experiences. We are bringing homes up to code when we do a main panel upgrade. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a great thing for the homeowner, but it requires patience. Please set those expectations properly with the homeowner so that we can be in lockstep with you and create those great experiences together. Thanks so much for being our partners. We appreciate you.